It started like any other day until it turned into a nightmare. A black man, just minding his own business, found himself face to face with two cops who had already made up their minds about him before he even said a word. No crime committed, no law broken, just suspicion in their eyes and power in their hands. As he stood there, confused and trying to understand why he was being stopped, things escalated fast. The officers, aggressive from the start, weren't interested in explanations. They had their own story already written. Before he knew it, they had him in cuffs, treating him like a criminal without a shred of evidence. Bystanders watched, some recording, some frozen in shock. But then something happened. Something that no one saw coming. A voice from the crowd spoke up, someone who knew the truth. The tension shifted, the air thick with the weight of what was about to unfold. What happened next? Did justice prevail, or did things take a turn for the worse? Stay with me as we break down the full story, because this is one moment that needs to be seen. The crowd grew restless. People whispered, some pulled out their phones, but no one dared to step forward, except for one man. His voice cut through the tension like a sharp blade. I saw everything. He didn't do anything wrong. The officers hesitated for a split second, but their grip on the man's arms tightened. He could feel the metal of the handcuffs digging into his wrists. His heart pounded, not just from fear, but from frustration. How could this be happening? The witness, a middle-aged man in a business suit, stepped closer. "Let him go," he said firmly. "I was right here when they stopped him. He wasn't causing any trouble." His voice was steady, but there was something else in his tone, something that made the officers exchange a quick glance. The man in cuffs looked at the stranger, searching for any sign of recognition. Why was he helping? Did he know something that could change everything? One of the officers cleared his throat. "Step back, sir. This doesn't concern you." But the witness didn't move. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something that made everyone pause. The energy shifted. Whatever was about to happen next, no one was ready for it. The officer stiffened as the man in the suit slowly pulled out his wallet and flipped it open. A badge. Not a police badge, but something just as powerful, an attorney's ID. The kind that carried weight in situations like this. The tension in the air thickened as the officers exchanged glances, their confidence flickering for just a second. "I know my rights," the black man said, his voice steady now. "And I know you have no reason to arrest me." His words didn't waver, but inside, anger and exhaustion burned. He had been here before, wrongfully accused, treated like a suspect for no reason other than existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. One of the officers scoffed, trying to regain control of the moment. "Step away, sir," he warned the attorney, but there was something unsure in his voice now. The crowd had grown larger. More phones were recording. The weight of the moment was shifting, but the officers weren't letting go just yet. The attorney held his ground. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice calm but firm. "And I suggest you think very carefully about what happens next." But instead of backing down, one of the officers reached for his radio. The black man's heart pounded. This wasn't over, far from it. Whatever was coming next could change everything. The officer's hand tightened around his radio, his jaw clenching as he spoke into it. "We need backup." His voice was steady, but there was something beneath it. Hesitation, maybe even doubt. The attorney didn't move, his eyes locked on the officers, waiting to see what they would do next. The black man, still in cuffs, could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The crowd had grown, their murmurs getting louder. Some were calling out, demanding answers. Others just watched, their cameras pointed, recording every second. The officers could feel the pressure now, but their grip on control was slipping. Then suddenly, a voice crackled through the radio. "What's the charge?" The question hung in the air. The officers didn't answer right away. The truth was, they had nothing. No reason. No cause. Just assumptions. And now, with all eyes on them, that truth was becoming impossible to ignore. The attorney stepped forward again, lowering his voice just enough so only the officers could hear. "Let him go, right now." It wasn't a request. It was a warning. One officer's hand hovered over his belt, fingers twitching. Would they back down? Or was this about to take a turn no one could stop? The officer's fingers twitched near his belt, his face unreadable. For a moment, it seemed like they might stand down. The attorney didn't flinch, the crowd didn't waver. But just when it felt like the situation might shift, another voice cut through the noise. "I need everyone to step back." A third officer had arrived, his uniform crisp, his presence demanding attention. But something was different about him. Unlike the first two, his expression wasn't filled with tension or authority. It was confusion. He looked at the black man in cuffs, then at the attorney, and finally at the officers who had called for backup. "What's the charge?" he asked, his tone sharp. Neither officer answered right away. The silence stretched, heavy and unspoken. The crowd sensed it too. Something wasn't adding up. The new officer's eyes narrowed. "I asked you a question," he repeated. One of the original officers shifted uncomfortably. "He was acting suspicious," he muttered. The attorney scoffed. "That's not a crime." The new officer studied them, then reached for his radio. But instead of calling for more backup, he did something no one expected. His next words made the first two officers' faces go pale. "Dispatch, I need internal affairs at my location." The entire crowd went still. This wasn't just an arrest anymore. This was something bigger. And now there was no turning back. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to go off. The two officers froze, their faces tightening as the meaning of the call sank in. Internal affairs. This was no longer just a routine stop. It was an investigation now. The crowd murmured, sensing the shift in power. The black man, still in cuffs, felt his pulse racing. Could this really be happening? After everything, after so many times where situations like this ended differently, was justice finally stepping in? One of the officers, the one who had been gripping his belt, took a step back. "There's no need for that," he muttered. "We were just doing our job." The new officer turned to him, his expression unreadable. "Is that right? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you had no reason to detain this man." He looked at the attorney, then at the crowd, then back at the two officers. "Take the cuffs off. Now." The hesitation lasted only a second, but it felt like forever. Finally, with stiff hands, one of the officers reached down and unlocked the cuffs. The black man rolled his wrists, feeling the freedom sink in, but also the weight of what just happened. Just when it seemed like the situation was over, the attorney spoke up. "This isn't finished." His voice was steady, calm, but there was something in it that made the officers uneasy. "We're filing a formal complaint, and we have witnesses." The officers didn't respond. They knew what that meant. The crowd wasn't just a group of bystanders anymore. They were evidence. And then, just as the tension started to fade, a voice from the back of the crowd called out, "Hey, why'd they really stop him?" Silence. No one had an answer. Because deep down, they all knew the truth. This time, the cameras had caught everything. And this time, there would be consequences. The weight of the moment settled over everyone. The two officers stood stiffly, their authority slipping away with every second that passed. The cameras were still rolling, the crowd still watching. There was no way to undo what had just happened. The black man took a deep breath, his wrists still sore from the cuffs. He looked at the attorney, then at the officer who had stepped in, the one who made sure justice didn't slip away this time. "Thank you," he said, his voice calm but heavy with emotion. The attorney nodded. "We'll make sure this doesn't get buried." His words weren't just a promise. They were a warning. As the crowd slowly began to disperse, the weight of the moment lingered. The officers knew their actions had been exposed. There would be reports, investigations, and most importantly, accountability. The black man walked away, freed but not unchanged. This wasn't just about him. It was about something bigger. As he glanced back one last time, he saw the officers standing there, their expressions unreadable. Maybe this moment would make them think twice next time. Maybe it wouldn't. But this time, the truth had been seen. And this time, the world was watching.